Nobody cared. They just wanted me to do my exams and go.
They never stop to think or look and see what's going on. They just assume the girl is being a brat or a bitch or throwing a tantrum.
Nobody asked her, what's going on with you?
This is Angry on the Inside. I'm Jess.
And I'm Jeannine. We're both certified ADHD life coaches, and so is our very first AOI guest, Louise Belshaw. But this still isn't coaching.
It's not therapy or medical advice.
It's real, honest conversations about being women with late diagnosed ADHD and everything that goes along with it.
Take what resonates and leave the rest. Everything discussed in this episode is for educational and informational purposes only.
Today, we're excited to welcome our very first guest on Angry on the Inside, Louise Belshaw. Louise is a certified ADHD life coach, former educator, and recently completed research looking at the experiences of women whose ADHD wasn't recognized until adulthood. In this first part of our conversation, we're talking about high school, puberty, perfectionism, friendships, and why so many girls were struggling while the adults around them completely misunderstood what was actually happening. This is part one of a two-part conversation. Although, Louise, I suppose I should be saying secondary school instead of high school?
No, high school is genuinely fine. People know. We're very good at picking up Americanisms, and that is one big hitter. Yeah, we do use that.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be an ism.
An ism?
Louise, we're so excited to have you here.
I'm really excited to be your first guest. I'm honored.
We're so excited. And we wanted it to be you because you are very much a shining light as to things that we strongly believe in, and making sure that our younger, newer generations are getting the support that they need, that they aren't experiencing the things that we as late diagnosed women have, and the anger that comes on the inside from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anger's something that I come across almost on a day-to-day basis. They might be young, they might not realize they have ADHD or autism or a combination, and they are battling with their feelings and puberty and just trying to manage their executive functions. And trust me, there's plenty of anger, there's plenty of feeling that comes out through coaching sessions, and obviously through the study that I conducted as well.
Do you want to give us just a little bit of your background and why study this area?
I was a teacher for 25 years. And became head of department in the latter few years of my career, and burnt out. Didn't realise I'd burnt out, but what had caused the burnout, I just thought it was stress. And all those years in education, I left to do a master's in psychology. And during that year, I realised an awful lot about myself. One of the main things came out of my study was my own diagnosis, because when I was interviewing women for the study, most of the time at the end of the interview, they would ask, when was I diagnosed, or when did you know? And they were asking me the question that I'd never asked myself. And
oh, wow.
It was really bizarre. Like, the questions I was asking and the answers I was receiving, I could have given the same answers. What was kismet or fate about the whole thing was I came away with a much greater understanding of myself than and other women through that. And I wouldn't have put myself down as somebody who has ADHD if I hadn't conducted that study and done all of the research, but mainly spoken to women about their experiences growing up. For me, that was just mind-blowing. And still, even after it, I was like, oh, no, I probably not. I probably just really relate to them strongly. But the irony being, one of the participants was my own daughter. There's a 70% chance that if she's got something, I've got something. And it's been a long, slow journey. I got my diagnosis last year. It's only about now that I'm coming to terms with it, making peace with it. I don't know whether I'm answering your question. I've gone off on a tangent.
That's the way we like it. When you're interviewing women, what did you relate to most? Was it where you were seeing yourself? Was it the experience, like how they felt going through school, how they felt now, or was it the symptoms?
It's a really good question. It was in the subtle things we don't hear a lot about, because the research doesn't cover personal experiences of women in the same way that it does of boys and men. And conducting a study requires originality and I wanted to focus in on late diagnosed women and their reflecting back on secondary school, things like perfectionism. In my mind, I thought perfectionism was when you'd actually achieved perfection. I'd look at somebody who seemed very well presented, who looked like they've got their act together, who's financially capable, and I'd go, that's a perfectionist. What I didn't realize that a real perfectionist is somebody who's struggling like mad to keep up and to be this version of themselves, which to a large degree is unobtainable. That was really striking. Friendships was another theme that came up out of the study. I haven't always found friendships easy to navigate. I have friends, but in school, I don't think I gelled with everybody. I was a bit confused by all of that. And definitely some impulsive moments that I had in school. I wasn't bad or badly behaved or anything, but I had my moments. And I guess all these subtle things that all pointed to it, but it was the way that I connected with the participants. I always liken it to like when two Cocker Spaniels meet one another and they're like, you're a Cocker Spaniel. And they get very excited. I feel the same way when I meet somebody who's neurodivergent. I'm probably you guys feel this too, instinctively.
Yeah. It's one of those things I think is very interesting. You get into your research, you're drawn to it, then end up realizing, yes, this scope also encompasses me. And I think that's really awesome.
Yeah. I should have been part of the study, really. I don't think that's ethical, but I think I could have been. From that point, I went into coaching. I work primarily with young people, teenagers, not girls specifically, but I do tend to coach more girls than boys. It's really rewarding. It's also really frustrating at times because the system could be so much better without much cost, without much in the way of training. Like I hear every day from young people what could be different, what could be better for them in education. And it's really minute changes for some, probably bigger for others, but for the vast majority, it's just minute changes. I'm always blown away with their self-awareness, their level of intelligence and openness to coaching because they've not necessarily formed real lasting versions of themselves. Like they're still delicate, they're still emerging. When they find an adult who isn't judging them, who is leading with curiosity, they can't quite believe it. Every other adult in their life is there to guide them, teach them. They're not just an adult on the sidelines cheering them on. That, as much as it can be difficult at sometimes to coach teens, I wouldn't swap it. I feel very privileged to be part of that young person's life because they can set up strategies and change the way that they perceive themselves very early on. What we didn't have growing up, that self-awareness of those strategies, whatever you want to call it, they can leave coaching with that full life. And that for me is like the reason why I choose young people all day long.
Justin and I are looking at each other like, who's going to talk?
Right?
Oh.
It does. It almost brings tears to my eyes because it is so true. And that type of work is what will save these girls the trauma that could occur in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, especially with younger girls, teen girls, secondary school level age. We understand that this is the time when they are the most vulnerable. This is the time when men will start approaching them. This is the time where things kick in, where their intense eye contact can be misconstrued and put them in positions that end up not having good outcomes. There are not people there to keep them safe. There are not people there to help them understand and recognize these patterns. And by you being there, and again, like you said, they're not used to someone holding space and they're not used to someone being there in a non-judgmental way. They're also not used to having someone just standing on the sidelines being like, oh, I'm sure you can do it. High five, go ahead. And then trying to figure it out themselves. We forget because when we were younger, we were probably much older in our teen years than what we were supposed to be. And that's very common for women with ADHD. We tend to act older than what we are when we are teens. And then as we get into our 20s and 30s, we actually go retroactively and become more childlike, for lack of a better word. That in and of itself is impactful to all of these young women to know that it's okay to start to learn how to manage your nervous system, start to understand what you need to look for in people who can be predatory or people who are looking to take advantage, understanding those red flags. That will improve their lives so drastically that we can't even imagine where we sit today, what they will get to look like. It won't be like us.
don't forget, they're living in a world that was is very different for them than it was for us. And social media, how impactful is that on somebody who's neurodivergent, already hugely aware that they might not fit in and they're comparing themselves to others. And then you've got the glossy world of social media that not only has given them dopamine hits, but it's given them all these messages that being perfect is attainable. Slotting in requires you to change who you are as a person and morph into the people who you see on screen. The impact on self-esteem and on a basic level, sleep is huge. I see so many young people who come in and they're like, I'm really, really tired. I can't switch off. I'm exhausted. They're up all night getting their dopamine hits on screen. They're not in a routine. And I know a lot of teens are like this, but it's so much more impactful if you are neurodivergent.
Hey, Louise, can you talk a little bit about the women that were involved in your study?
With my study, it was interview based, all of it. There was no maths. I don't do maths. We've never got on. I wanted to do interviews only and then analyze what was being said, and then from that pull out common themes. Age ranges were from the age of 21 up into late 50s. There were 5 women, the reason being, any more than that, you would not necessarily have got the kind of interesting or important essential data. With 5 women, you're able to really deep dive that and come up with some common themes. Every single woman had been late diagnosed. Every one of them had struggles in high school. Puberty was something that was mentioned in every single interview as being hugely life-changing, as was the transition from primary into high school. Would it be juniors? But from the age of 11 onwards, over here, we changed schools, going to high school. And that for a lot of participants, nearly all of them actually, was really pivotal. In fact, 2 of the participants talked about primary school being a bubble, and both used that metaphor, bubble. And when that happened, I was like, whoa, how are they both using that word? It's not a common term, but it is a bubble. Like, it's one class, it's 1 or 2 teachers, predictable every day, routine led. A lot of them did really well in primary school, like offered scholarships to high school, very, very bright, very switched on. Then when they went into high school, the demand on executive function really kicks in, it increases. So a lot of the participants spoke about how that rocked their world, basically, and how that with puberty made it almost unmanageable. One of the participants spoke about literally growing boobs overnight, which sounds really odd, but I think what she was getting at was that puberty was so fast and so hard hitting. Her whole sense of identity went straight out of the window. Up until that point, she'd been a perfectionist. She'd been a hard worker, A grade. She'd stay up till 2, 3 in the morning doing extra maths to get the credit, to get the praise from the teachers. And then literally overnight, how she described it, she woke up and went, why am I bothering? Who cares? I'm not even getting the recognition for all the effort that I'm putting in, so I'm not doing any of it. From there, it was disruptive behavior, it was fighting, everybody just assumed that she'd switched off deliberately. Nobody asked her, what's going on with you? By the time she got to her final year and she was doing exams, she was truanting, barely in school. The quote I remember distinctly is, nobody cared, they just wanted me to do my exams and go. What was going on behind the scenes is that she was caring for a younger member of the family because there'd been a death. She was coping with that, older than her years, like you said, Jess, and I'd massively struggled for the last 3, 4 years in high school. That was one participant. There was a lot of similar stories from the participants who all talked about the impact of puberty and how that just changed everything, made it harder. Again, truanting, drinking, seeking out dopamine hits by being aggressive, by acting out and having teachers give them attention that way, negative attention. I could talk for days on that, to be honest.
I can remember, and I don't want to speak for Jeannine, but for myself, very similar outcomes. Working hard in school, doing fine, physically overdeveloped, hit what we would call junior high, which is 13, 14 years of age, and then everything just going crazy. It sucks because even with all the changes that have come along, the better we do now, it's still a case that most of those girls are receiving the same input that we received, which is If you would just do this, it is such a shame. You are so much better than this. You can do better than this. And it's like they never stop to think or look and see what's going on. They just assume the girl is being a brat or a bitch or throwing a tantrum. It all gets brushed off. Here is this amazing, independent person who's getting drowned in emotions and sensory overwhelm and being completely left behind by everyone in their lives. And that causes even more issues and opens them up to even scarier things out in the real world because they're having to become so hyper independent. I'm curious, you were saying earlier with the young ladies that you work with, every day hearing ways that things could be improved, small things. What are they saying that would help them in this new generation?
So in coaching, we talk about curiosity, don't we? And we talk about being non-judgmental. What I witness or have witnessed in schools is an over-reliance on talking to the pupil as opposed to listening. If I could say two things to educators. One, connection is everything. Relationships are everything. And make sure that they feel valued and heard and understood. Even if you're in the middle of a maths lesson, you've got a certain target to reach by the end of that hour, you notice them drifting off, have a conversation about something else. It's literally a rest break, but it's also building up connection. It's building trust. If I had £1 for every time a young person says to me, I like that teacher, but that teacher hates me, I would be in like 6-figure numbers by this point. Because they hate me. Like, they genuinely feel that. That teacher could be having a bad day. They could be under lots and lots of pressure to deliver results. I would imagine nearly every teacher is under pressure to deliver results. But ultimately, they have got to stop every now and then and recognize that they've got a young human being in front of them and they need that connection more than most. They need to know that they factor in that teacher's world. They're not just a number or a statistic. That's my fear for the education system. No matter what country you're in, that children becoming more about stats and passes or fails. We're not making that connection. I don't know what it's like over there, but over here, it's very PowerPoint reliant. The pace is relentless. The exam system, the curriculum, that there is no wriggle room.
It's the same here. They are very hard on our teachers here at making sure that they are hitting certain numbers, which really just leaves the children behind because what are you going to do? You're an adult and you need to keep your job. So you have to push through the curriculum and make sure that they're getting it. But the hard part is, yes, taking that time, making that connection, because all of these children, male or female, are hypersensitive.
Absolutely.
And most of them are people pleasers dealing with perfectionist issues. They are used to having to monitor everyone else's feelings, everybody else's expectations. They are so used to being the one that regulates the room. That's one of those things people don't look out for either that should be looked out for is look for the children who are regulating the room. Teachers, look for the children who make you feel better and make you feel like your day is better because they want to make sure you are happy. Those aren't old souls. Those are children who are neurodiverse. Those are kids who have experienced trauma and that are trying to regulate their environment to make sure that everything's running smoothly, that gets missed often.
Yeah, I've never thought about it in that way before, but they do take on that responsibility sometimes, don't they? Even if it's the opposite, where they want to control the environment because their bored threshold long gone. They're really struggling to focus. They're really struggling to keep a lid on their impulsivity. So it's easier to be sent out of the room than stay in the room and stay dysregulated, or it's easier to draw negative attention and almost pull on that release valve than it is to sit there and try and hold all of that, all those feelings in, or whatever you want to call it, boredom. Yeah, so it's a really, really salient point. I hadn't thought of that before.
I was always more comfortable if I had to go sit in the hall. At least I could do my own thing. If I got sent to the principal's office, I had time to walk through the halls and mill around and reset and get a drink of water.
That's a big thing in the UK. I mean, huge. I would say the vast majority of young people that I coach have a pass to leave the classroom whenever they want to, but it's starting to vary amongst schools. Some schools will allow fidget tools. others won't. Some schools acknowledge neurodivergence and are really, really good at training staff. Others don't. Like, it's literally that black and white, and the system is all over the place. Do I hope that it'll get better over time? Definitely. Is there enough pressure on schools to train teachers and to develop neuro-inclusive practices? Not enough. Definitely not enough. One of the that I asked at the end of my study was, is there anything that a teacher could have said to you that would have made a difference at that time? And the vast majority said, if they just pulled me to one side and said, is everything okay? What's going on?
So much is held in those two questions. Is everything okay? And what's going on? As ADHD women, we know that everything is not okay. We need to get better at being genuinely curious about what's really going on for these girls. Listening to Louise talk about her research, what stands out is how often the answer wasn't some huge intervention or perfect plan. It was noticing that a girl who suddenly seemed angry, difficult, distracted, emotional, or disconnected might actually be struggling, recognizing that the adults and the authority figures don't always have it right.
Part 1 was about the girls who were missed. Part 2 is about what happens when those girls grow up and become us. We'll be talking about what comes after the diagnosis, the questions, the anger, the grief, and what happens when you start looking back at your life through an entirely different lens.
Part 2 of our conversation with Louise drops on Thursday. If you know a girl who needs more curiosity and fewer assumptions, send this episode, your understanding, and strength her way.
Remember, you're not alone, and you're not the only one who's angry on the inside.